All right. The continuation. We are now level 30 in the world of Azeroth. A level 30 human warrior. It is time to continue. I think today we're going to try to hit level 40. We're going to play, and we're going to play hard. All right, let's get into it. All right, I logged in, and I am now level 30. Level 30 was very interesting, to say the least. I started out just questing, and honestly, questing is probably one of the main contents of the game. And from my perspective, I feel like as a new player, you're looking at questing as like one of the most important parts of the game, right? And it's what kind of fuels you and keeps you going on a straight path. I think it's very interesting to see how leveling in certain areas can be a little bit more difficult than others, and as the game progresses, it gets a little bit more difficult to complete quests and to figure out where exactly you need to go. I think as I'm playing, I'm trying harder and harder to figure out, where do I need to go exactly to make sure that I am getting the most experience possible. And WoW kind of presents a more difficult challenge when it comes to understanding where to go next. And I feel like as I'm going along, I'm starting to understand that process a little bit more and more as I continue to level up. So I think for a new player, when it comes to playing World of Warcraft, and I don't know if this is the same for retail WoW as it is for classic, but understanding your rotation on abilities can be a little bit hard. And I've had to find online resources to kind of aid me in using my abilities and what should be used before one ability and what should be used after. And as a warrior, from my understanding, it's a little bit more difficult because you can't just AoE farm everything. You have to pull one person, or sometimes you can pull, multiple mobs at the same time. But for example, the ability to rend somebody, so you apply a bleed, and that should be one of the first things you do so you have this damage over time on top of everything else that you have going on. Understanding the ability Victory Rush was kind of hard for me because I didn't really pay attention to everything on my screen, but essentially you have a certain amount of time to attack something else to make sure that your Victory Rush is still active, and there's tons of little intricacies that you find out in this game, which for a new player can be a little bit hard to understand. And like I said, I don't know if that's the same for retail WoW as it is for classic WoW. But for new players to try and understand all of these small intricacies in the game when it comes to your application of abilities and what should be popped at certain times, like you have certain abilities that are buffs for yourself, and then you have certain abilities that are debuffs for enemies, and those abilities like Sunder Armor, where you can apply 3 stacks. Not a lot of new players will understand the importance of applying 3 stacks of Sunder Armor, so that way you're able to inflict more damage on enemy or a boss.
Free something. Unless you go to the Netherlands area.
Tells me to go to Felwood, Fairless, the Hinterlands.
Do you have
Underoath,
night crawlers?
I don't.
I would have like plus 50 or 75 fishing to put on, and then do the Swamp of Sorrows.
So, for example, as a new player, I'm sitting here in a voice chat with some of my guild mates, and they're talking about all these different professions and little things that they're getting into. In my world, I'm like, oh man, I just need to get to level 60, and when I get to level 60, I start getting flying, and, that's when the game really starts. But I started to realize as I listened to them, I've kind of messed up until this point, and I wouldn't have been, you know, able to understand the professions in this game had somebody not start talking about it and explaining it to me. And for example, like, I should have gotten into mining and armor smithing at the very beginning, and I kind of just looked over because I was like, yeah, that's something I can do, when I go back later on, and eventually I'll get around to that. But now I realized that this entire time I could have been leveling mining and smithing, fishing, and all these little things that are all content in the game, and I just was not wise enough to do it. So now I'm level 30 something and super far behind on my professions, and I actually asked for some help. Here in a minute I will be following along with one of my guild mates, and she explains in depth and shows me all of these things that I should have been doing this whole time. And it's kind of a little mildly upsetting that I've gone so far into this game already, and I am completely missing a key component of it, which is understandable as a new player. Those things aren't very obvious, and it's okay to ask for help, especially being a brand new player.
Your fishing pole
All right.
and click. There you go. And your bobber will go up and down when the fish is bit. Click on your bobber when it goes up and down, when it starts shaking.
Yeah.
Just right click on it. Okay. And see,
All right.
and just see you caught something. And just hit the
So, like I said, I began rolling around with one of my guild mates, and she was showing me how to fish, and I was pretty intrigued by it. But also, on top of fishing, I was completing a daily quest, and to complete certain achievements in this game, you have to complete daily quests and a certain number of them. So, I started learning professions like fishing, which can be pretty important for things like cooking, which I had not begun yet. And she was just kind of taking me on this journey of, hey, this is also something that you're supposed to be doing in this game. And it was kind of nice. It was a break from leveling. Like, I had just been pounding out levels like one after another, completing quests, but I had neglected the other part of this game that is fun. The thing to keep in mind as a new player in World of Warcraft, at least World of Warcraft Classic, is it's also a social game, and Classic itself is more lenient on the social aspect of the game. So you are supposed to get together with friends and guildmates and do things like a fishing event, dungeon events, PvP events, and tons of other little things that people make up to keep their guild together and, keep the game very interesting and fun. And me not understanding the fact that I had to fish, mine, armor smith, and so many different other things kind of put me behind the eight ball, and was kind of a shock, like, holy crap, I am not doing as well as I thought I was. And these are things that everybody does, and now I'm kind of behind. And I feel like from a new player's perspective, if they were to have a similar experience like me, they might be like, well, crap, man, what am I supposed to do now? Like, am I really not going to be able to achieve certain things or whatever? But that's not necessarily true. You can always go back and do things that were supposed to be done before. That's kind of the beauty of MMO that's open world, is there's not one specific thing that you are absolutely supposed to do. And if you like leveling and pounding out levels, just go for that, and you can come back and retrace your steps later. Or if you like to have a balance of, all right, I've had just about enough of leveling for a while. I've been doing a lot of quests, a lot of dungeons. Let's take a break and go fish. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. And I feel like understanding the freedom in your ability of what you can achieve in the game at an earlier on perspective could lead to longevity of playing the game, because you also have to keep in mind there are people that have multiple characters that can do each and every little thing in the game, and I have barely scratched the surface of what is achievable and obtainable in this game up until this point.
I walked it one time just to see, and it takes what 45 minutes to walk it or something like that.
Jeez.
And you can't ride on your mountain here. You have to walk it.
That's
And
annoying.
down at the bottom of this here, you'll see underwater, the ocean, and you'll see some big monsters.
I think something important to note as a new player, in when my eyes were open to all the other little things that are in the game that is outside of leveling, I was kind of like taken back a little bit. And like you might have saw I was like smiling, have a good time. Like this player that I'm playing with is like, look at all the little fish driving around or, swimming around, and there's a sea monster, and now we're on this tram car. And then here in a minute, she's like, it's a low level quest, but you can put these rats in a trans with a flute, and you have to turn him into this guy, and he's going to smash him. It's like, you realize that the game is not completely about hardcore leveling and, oh man, I got to get here and do this. And it's like, no, like, take your time and enjoy what the game has to offer. Because back when the game initially released, off of everything that I've read, understood, watched, the game was not necessarily completely about getting world first, level 60 in your realm, and doing all these super high achievable things. Like, a lot of people loved the game because it was social media back then. They, things like MySpace, Facebook, whatever did exist back then, but there wasn't anything that was truly, you know, immersive, and you're walking around with somebody seeing these cool things that you'd never, thought could exist on the internet. But the opportunity presented itself when World of Warcraft first came out, and coming in and playing the game in 2024, it's kind of like a look back in the past on, why was this game such a big deal to everybody? And like, why did everybody freaking, lose their minds about World of Warcraft in the gaming community back in the early 2000s? Back in the early 2000s, I was just born, right? So, like, I couldn't comprehend something like this. But playing it in 2024 as a 23-year-old, it's like, okay, I see why people, gave up hours and hours of their life to play this, because not everybody, had a big social network of friends in real life. And to be able to jump onto something like this and play with your guild of people, maybe you have a group of 5 to 10 people that you consistently play with, and this was fun. This was their social part of their day after they got done with work, or maybe they didn't work, but and they hopped on World of Warcraft and had a swell time. And I think my experience walking around with my guildmate here really opened my eyes on, the other aspects of the game outside of, hardcore leveling, pounding quests out, doing dungeons. Like, this is also an aspect of the game that if a new player comes in, they need to experience, because it's kind of the fun of it. Yes, initially quests are super fun, and you're like, oh man, now I'm going here. I got this gear. I got this stat line now. Ooh, check out this new ability. That only is fun for so long. At this point in the game, I think I'd put around a day's worth of hours into the game, and all that stuff became redundant. But to have a nice break of, like, check this place out, this cool, super cool forge that's on the other side of the map, and there are tons of different things for you to see and accomplish and train. Make sure you do your professions. Like, it's just another aspect of the game that will keep you coming back, and it'll keep you feeling like, as a new player, this is part of it. This is, what I do, and it's pretty enjoyable. Oh, okay. There we go. So I have her doll. So I was like, why did they stop glowing? It's a bug. Nope, I just had to make the. So one thing I think that's important for a new player to understand is once you get to a certain level, I think around 35 or 36, you are met with the where do I go now? So you have to look at your map, and on the map, it'll tell you certain levels in certain areas and where about you should be for questing. I had to make a very large trek on foot, well, I guess on my mount across the world, and I finally hit level 40. Um, but I had to go to the Eastern Plague Lands, and I was in Stranglethorn when I was leveling. Obviously, I was still doing dungeons and stuff in between, but I did not understand that the game is not just like a one after another. Hey, or go to this area now. You have to kind of figure it out for yourself. And I had to look across the map and figure out where I needed to walk to get to a certain area and making sure that I'm hitting the flight paths on the way. So that way, if I have to come back and leave, I can fly. But I found myself just staying in the areas and, not coming back to Stormwind or anywhere where I can train levels because I didn't want to make that flight or walk again because I wanted to get to a certain level in a certain time frame. But it easily reminded me how easy it is to die in the game because when I came across new levels in higher level areas, like the monsters were hard again, I was like, well, this is where I should be because I shouldn't just be two-shotting everything like I was 30 minutes prior to this. So one thing that new players need to look out for is understanding where to go next and not spending too much time in one area that's too easy because the experience starts lacking and then your ability to progress fast in the game kind of slows down. So pay attention to your level and pay attention to the areas that you can possibly go into. Now, another thing to understand is completing quests in a certain area, you can unlock achievements, for the Eastern Plague Lands. Like, once you do all the quests in the Eastern Plague Lands, at least the big ones, you'll get an achievement saying Eastern Plague Land quests. And those are kind of nice, fulfilling, rewarding achievements to get because it means, yep, I completed this area and I'm ready to go on to the next one. But overall, level 30 to 40 took a good amount of time. I ended up doing a 10-hour stream. So as you get higher level, the levels will be harder to achieve. But level 30 to 40 is a fun one, and it'll require you to spend a lot more time in one certain area. But as soon as I hit level 40, I head back to Stormwind because I was under the impression that at level 40 you were able to start flying on your flight mounts, and oh boy was I wrong, and I figured out, damn, I still can't fly yet. But no, at level 40 you are able to get journeyman riding, I believe, and it makes you ride a lot faster. But I went back to Stormwind because I thought, okay, I'll be able to fly back to the area I was just in and continue questing. But at least I was able to have a faster mount and I was able to get there a little bit quicker. And I was able to use the flight mechanic in the game to get somewhat close on some of the areas that I picked up for flight. I didn't understand that you had to get to like an area that had a mailbox and a flight path to be able to unlock the world travel flights where you can go from one area to another. So some of the flight paths, doesn't open up large flight paths, if that makes sense. Like to be able to go from Stormwind to the Eastern Plague Lands, there's a certain flight path that you have to find. But I ended up getting my journeyman riding, and it was pretty fun. But as I was saying, level to 30 to 40 was long. I ended up doing a 10-hour stream, and it got a little redundant. It was nice to have the little break in there, which kind of made it take 10 hours to understand all the fishing, smelting, mining stuff. And I personally think I'm going to wait until I hit max level, and then I'm going to go back and do all those skills at the end. And then, maybe I start making a new character and I can do that process a little bit more properly. But definitely understand as a new player that at level 40, you get your journeyman riding. And at level 60, I believe, is when you get your flight. And apparently, flying kind of makes the game, a whole lot more easier and speeds things up a bit. But thank you guys for tuning in to another video of a new WoW player playing WoW for the first time. And it's honestly been great. I've had a couple new subscribers. Thank you guys for joining along on the journey. I think we got close to 400 views on the last video at the time of this recording. That's exciting. Thank you guys so much for the support so far, and I look forward to continuing this journey together forever. All right, guys. Thank you.